Hi, my name's Raya, and I guess this is the part where I tell you how I ended up sitting alone in an ER with a broken arm, a concussion, and a phone screen that lit up with the words, "Grab a taxi." That was my parents' response. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We're on our way." Just that. And while they sipped rosé with my sister's fiancé at a waterfront lunch, I didn't even know was an engagement party. I was bleeding, both inside and out. They say family protects you. But what if mine always planned to leave me behind? How do you fight a family who rewrites the truth before you even know what happened? The first thing I remember is the beeping, soft and steady, mechanical, nothing like the chaos that came before it. The white fluorescent lights above me felt like they were burning through my eyelids. My mouth was dry, my head pounded, and my left arm ached like it had been crushed in a vice. A nurse noticed me stirring. "You're awake. That's good news." "You've been out for a few hours." I tried to speak, but it came out as a hoarse rasp. She offered me a sip of water, holding the straw to my lips. I managed a weak nod and whispered, "What happened?" "You were in a car accident," she said gently. "A driver ran a red light. You took the brunt of the impact on the driver's side. You've got a clean break in your left arm and a concussion. No internal bleeding, thank God." The words settled like a fog over me. I closed my eyes again, trying to piece it all together. The rain, the stoplight turning green, the blur of headlights. Then, nothing. Just this sterile hospital room, the smell of antiseptic, and the dull weight of painkillers in my veins. "Did someone call my parents?" I asked, still groggy. "We tried, no answer. You can try texting them if you'd like. Sometimes hearing it from you helps." My phone had survived the crash better than I did, cracked but functional. I clumsily typed out a message with my right hand. "I was in an accident. At St. Mary's, broken arm, concussion. Can you pick me up?" It took more energy than I expected. My hands trembled as I hit send. I waited. Minutes passed. Then 3 dots appeared. The reply came fast, and it hit harder than the crash. "OMG, that's awful. But we're at an important lunch with Julian. Grab a taxi?" I stared at the screen. Not a "we'll be right there." Not even a "call us when you're discharged." Just a casual shrug of a message from the 2 people who brought me into this world. I read it again. Then a 3rd time. Grab a taxi. That was their response to their youngest daughter lying in a hospital bed with a concussion and a broken arm. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The fog in my head began to lift, replaced with a sharp, cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. They were having lunch. With Julian. Julian, the golden boy. The man who wasn't even part of our family until Seraphine decided he was. My parents had adored him from day one. Successful, charming, polished. He had a way of making them laugh even when he said nothing of value. I was never the favorite, not even close. Seraphine was the pride of the family. Firstborn, first to get a master's degree, first to make 6 figures. She walked into every room like she owned it. And I was always just there, the quiet one, the too sensitive one, the one who paid half the down payment on the condo but signed over the paperwork just to keep things simple. Maybe they thought I wouldn't notice, or maybe they hoped I wouldn't say anything when I did. "Is there anyone else we can call for you?" the nurse asked. I didn't answer immediately. My eyes remained on the text. That one sentence, "grab a taxi," echoed louder than anything I had heard since waking up. "Yes," I finally said. "I know who to call." His name was Officer Dave Reynolds. He'd known our family for years. A friend of my uncle's from the police department, a good man, quiet, reliable, not one for dramatics, but he knew how to get a point across. I dialed his number. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Raya?" His voice carried concern. "Heard about the accident. Are you okay?" "I will be," I said. "Listen, they still haven't responded, but I know where they are." "Your parents?" "Yes, they're at the Gilded Fork, downtown, with Julian." There was a brief pause on the line. I imagined Dave setting his coffee down, glancing toward his partner. "You want us to do a wellness notification?" he asked carefully. I want them to be notified, I replied. In person, uniformed, just so they understand the seriousness. That's all. Another pause, then a calm, firm response. Understood. I hung up. The nurse returned to check my vitals. I answered her questions mechanically, trying not to let the buzzing in my head overwhelm me. But inside, something had shifted. All my life, I'd waited for them to see me, to treat me like I mattered, like I wasn't just background noise to their curated family image. They didn't come when I needed them, because rosé and risotto were more important, because Julian was more important. And maybe that had always been true. But this time, I wasn't going to swallow it. Not quietly, not again. Let's see how important that rosé really is when cops start asking questions. It didn't take long. Dave texted me 20 minutes later. Just a brief update. Notification made. Your parents were at the Gilded Fork. Seemed surprised. That was it. Clinical and to the point. I didn't need the details. My mind had already painted the entire scene like a vivid mural of discomfort. In my head, I could see it playing out, the moment two uniformed officers walked into that trendy glass-walled restaurant, the one where you needed a reservation 3 weeks in advance, and the wine list was longer than the menu. I could see my mother's hand freeze mid-air, a delicate flute of rosé caught just before reaching her lips. My father, ever the man of order, probably tightened his jaw, maybe adjusted his cufflinks like he always did when he was caught off guard. And Seraphine, she would have leaned back in her seat, maintaining posture, waiting to see if whatever was happening might inconvenience her moment. Julian probably tried to smooth things over, flashing that well-practiced smile of his. But I wasn't there to see it, because I hadn't been invited. I had almost drifted off again when my phone buzzed on the hospital tray. It was a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. We were never close, but she was the kind that sent Happy Thanksgiving texts every year without fail. Her message read, "Didn't know you weren't coming to the engagement lunch. Seraphine looked stunning. Hope you're okay." I stared at it for a while, blinking like the words weren't in English. Engagement lunch? That wasn't just a lunch. That was a formal family gathering. That was an event people took off work for, drove across town for, brought gifts to, wore heels for. And I wasn't just not there, I hadn't even been told it was happening. I wasn't absent, I was erased. Somehow that realization hit harder than the accident itself. It wasn't the first time I'd felt left out, but this wasn't oversight. This was orchestration. The room felt smaller, tighter. I moved my legs slowly to the side of the bed, careful of my sling. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through messages, but found nothing. Not a single text, not a word about today's event, or Seraphine, or even a thinking of you. Instead, something else popped up. A notification from another cousin, a screenshot mistakenly sent to our group thread. It was a photo of a chat labeled engagement planning, filled with names of family members and lines of conversation. But not mine, I wasn't in it. Underneath one thread, someone had written, "Let's just not tell Raya, she's always so dramatic. We don't need that vibe today." Another chimed in, "Exactly. It's a happy day. Let's not complicate it." My name wasn't mentioned again. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because there was no more room left in me for tears. There was just this hollow thump in my chest and the slow, seeping understanding that this wasn't new. It had always been this way. Birthdays I found out about from Instagram posts. Group vacations I hadn't been invited to. Family dinners where I must have been busy. I used to tell myself they just forgot. That maybe I didn't answer a text, or someone thought I was out of town. But now I saw the pattern. It was intentional. When we were teenagers, Seraphine got the big birthday bashes, the custom cakes, the backyard tents with twinkle lights. I got dinner at Applebee's, if it fit everyone's schedule. When she landed her first job, Mom made a scrapbook. When I got my MBA while working 2 jobs, they mailed a card that arrived 3 days late. I had been told, repeatedly, that I was too sensitive, too serious, too confrontational. They called it tough love. I called it erasure, but only in my head. Until now, lying there, one arm useless, Head pounding, I realized the truth. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been carefully, deliberately removed. The nurse came in again, this time to check vitals. I nodded when she asked if I was okay, even though I wasn't. She asked if I needed anything else. Silence, I said. And maybe a blanket. She smiled gently. Coming right up. Once alone again, I opened my texts and reread the family group chat screenshot, every line sliced like paper cuts. She always makes things about her. Can we not make this day about trauma? She'll find a way to turn a toast into a therapy session. That last one stuck with me, because I had done that, once, years ago. At another family event, I'd made a small comment about being grateful for the little things, for getting through tough times. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even directed at anyone. But clearly, that was too much. I turned off my phone. No more notifications, no more messages, no more accidental peeks into a life I was never invited to share. My hand moved slowly to my stomach. I hadn't eaten since the accident. My appetite was gone. The physical pain didn't compare to the ache of knowing that even if I had died in that crash, I'm not sure anyone at that lunch would have noticed until the check came. For years, I told myself I was just different, that my family operated a certain way and I needed to meet them where they were, that love looked different for everyone. But love isn't silent when you're in pain. Love doesn't show up only when it's convenient. Love doesn't exclude you from the moments you'll remember forever, even if it's just to say, "We wish you could be here." They didn't wish me there. They wished I wouldn't exist long enough to ruin the pictures. I curled up on the side of the bed that didn't hurt, pulling the blanket up to my chin. Outside, the sky had turned a soft gray blue, the kind that signaled dusk settling in. Maybe tomorrow I'd start figuring out what came next. But for tonight, I needed nothing from anyone. Turns out, even my absence made them look better. It had been a few hours since I'd turned off my phone. The hospital had grown quieter as the afternoon slipped into early evening. I could hear a faint hum from the hallway, nurses exchanging notes, someone pushing a cart. Nothing urgent, nothing loud, just the rhythm of people doing their jobs, something steady, unlike the static swirling in my chest. I must have dozed off at some point because when I opened my eyes again, there was someone new standing near my bed. Dr. Mason. A name I hadn't heard in years, but a face I knew instantly. He was my mother's friend from the garden club, the kind of man who always called me kiddo and brought cinnamon muffins to neighborhood brunches. "I didn't realize you'd be the one handling my case," I said, voice still gravelly. He smiled softly, stepping closer. "I wasn't, actually. Just passing through. Heard what happened. Figured I'd stop in and check." His tone was gentle, but not forced. Familiar, but layered now with something else, hesitation. "Thanks," I said. "They said the other driver ran a red light." He nodded. "Yeah, sounds like a mess. But you're lucky. A few more inches and that impact would have been on your chest." I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet. Then he said it, so casually, as if commenting on the weather. "Your parents didn't come?" I didn't flinch. "Nope." "I was surprised," he said, leaning slightly on the bed rail. "I mean, it looked serious, not like a fender bender. Usually someone shows up for these things." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The word sat heavy in the air between us. He left a few minutes later after reminding me to rest and drink more fluids. But the damage had already been done, and not by the accident. Someone else had noticed. Someone who wasn't family. Someone who wasn't trying to hurt me. And that made it real. Not imagined. Not exaggerated. Not too emotional. I laid back slowly, staring at the ceiling, remembering that phrase like a recording on loop. "You're too emotional." I'd heard it so many times over the years that it had become my family's version of a shut-off switch. At 13, when I found out Seraphine had been accepted to a summer science program, and I hadn't even been told it existed, I cried. Not because I was jealous, but because I wanted to matter too. My mother had looked at me and said, "This is her moment, Raya. Don't make it about you." At 16, when my college acceptance letter arrived and no one was home to celebrate with me, I baked my own cake. When I showed it to them later that evening, proud and hopeful, my dad had chuckled. Well, that's sweet, but no need to be dramatic. At 24, I called my mom from my first solo apartment, sobbing because I was scared and overwhelmed and everything felt too big. She'd said, "You need to toughen up. Real life doesn't pause for feelings." And then there was the big one, 30. The year I put a down payment on the condo. I asked Seraphine to co-sign because I thought it might help the approval process. Somehow, the paperwork ended up in her name. When I asked Mom why it had been done behind my back, she said, "It's not that serious. Don't blow it out of proportion." Those words had been my life's refrain, a quiet erasure of every experience that didn't fit their script. Now, lying in a hospital bed with a bruised body and a bruised heart, I finally saw it for what it was. Not accidental, not incidental, deliberate. My family hadn't just neglected me, they'd edited me out, and I had let them. Because every time I'd tried to speak up, to say, "This hurts," I was met with that same phrase, "You're being too sensitive." It was a weapon disguised as a comfort, a dismissal painted as wisdom. But now I wasn't a teenager crying in the bathroom. I wasn't a new graduate afraid of making rent. I was a grown woman with a busted arm, a bank account, and a phone full of receipts, and I was tired of pretending it didn't happen. I pushed the hospital tray aside and reached for my notepad, one of those spiral-bound ones they leave on the windowsill for recovery notes. I didn't care what it was meant for. I needed it. On the first page, I wrote in bold, what they did versus what they said. Underneath, I started listing. Text. Grab a taxi. After a confirmed concussion and fractured humerus. Screenshot from group chat. I was actively excluded. Down payment receipts. Condo purchase dated 2 years ago, paid from my account. Title registry, under Seraphine's name, no joint ownership listed. Then I flipped to a fresh page. Times I was called too emotional, but was actually right. The list was long. I only made it halfway through before I needed to stop. Not because it hurt, but because the clarity was finally setting in. I'd spent my whole life trying not to be a burden, not to make waves, not to draw attention to my needs, but it hadn't earned me love, or inclusion, or loyalty. It had just made me easier to ignore. Now, for the first time, I was collecting, organizing, not for revenge, not even for justice, yet, just to remember, to reclaim the truth before it got rewritten by people who preferred a version of me that didn't exist. The version who never asked for anything, who clapped at the right times, who quietly watched as others got credit for her work, her contributions, her sacrifices. I put the pen down, closed the notepad, and looked out the window. The sky had turned navy, speckled with early stars. Somewhere across town, Seraphine was probably opening engagement gifts, basking in applause, sipping champagne she didn't pay for. And maybe Mom was making her signature toast. The one that always ended with, "We've always been a strong family." I imagined her voice. Then I imagined mine. If I couldn't matter to them emotionally, I whispered, maybe I could matter legally. After writing that sentence in my notebook, if I couldn't matter to them emotionally, maybe I could matter legally. I stared at it for a while. The words didn't feel bitter. They felt sharp, clear. Like the edge of something I'd carried around for years without realizing it could cut both ways. The next morning, the nurse came in at 7 for vitals. My body still ached, my arm was still wrapped tight in a sling, but my mind was the clearest it had been since the accident. She asked if I wanted breakfast. I said no, I wasn't hungry. What I needed was answers and paperwork. By 9 o'clock, I was discharged. They arranged a ride share for me since, of course, no one had shown up. I gave the driver my condo address, already bracing for the tension I knew would be waiting when I walked in. It was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. Like the silence that lingers after an argument, even when no words were spoken. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. My keys still worked, though something told me it was only a matter of time before that changed. The living room looked untouched, staged almost, magazines stacked neatly, a scented candle burning too long on the table, as if someone had tried to make the space look welcoming in a hurry. I didn't call out. I wasn't there to announce myself. I was there to investigate. I went to the file cabinet in the spare bedroom where I'd stored everything from mortgage papers to tax documents. My left arm slowed me down, but I was determined. I pulled out a thick folder labeled Condo, 2022 Purchase. I flipped through the pages. The original mortgage estimate, proof of earnest money, inspection records. And then, there it was. A single-page document that had once been passed to me in a rush during closing with the words, "It's just a temporary transfer. You'll still be the one paying. It's just easier for approval this way." Signed by me and by Seraphine. It was a full ownership transfer. No expiration clause, no reversion language, no joint title. It was hers, and I had signed it. I sat there, in my own condo, reading the fine print of how I'd legally given away the only piece of security I'd built for myself, because I'd trusted them, because I was the easy one, the one who didn't need the spotlight. My chest burned, not with shame, but with certainty. I was going to take it back. An hour later, I heard the front door open and close. Heels clicked across the floor like they were walking a runway. Seraphine's voice followed. "Raya, you're home." I didn't answer right away. I tucked the paperwork back in the folder and stood. She appeared in the doorway holding a bouquet of tulips, my favorite, ironically, and a gift bag. "I brought you something," she said, walking in like it was her apartment. "And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry you've been so upset." So upset? I reached for the flowers without taking them. "Thanks." She placed the gift bag on the desk. "There's a little something in there. Just, from me and Julian. We thought it might cheer you up. It's been a lot lately." It had. "I'll open it later," I said, voice steady. "Of course." She smiled, then added, "I hope you're feeling better." "I'm getting there." "Good. Well, I'll let you rest. Just wanted to drop that off and say hi." She didn't ask about the accident. She didn't ask about the pain. And I didn't give her the satisfaction of asking why she really came. When she left, I sat down and opened the gift bag. Inside was a small ceramic dish with gold trim, the kind of thing you'd put jewelry or keys in. Tucked beneath it, a folded document. I pulled it out, expecting a card. It was a copy of the title transfer. Again. This time, with the phrase "finalized" written in blue ink across the top. My name wasn't on it. It wasn't even in the footnotes. I stared at it, lips pressed together, not blinking. They weren't even hiding it anymore. I walked to the kitchen, scanned the document with my phone, and emailed it to myself. Then I opened my laptop, created a new folder called Condo Ownership Dispute, and began uploading everything I had. Photos of the receipts, screenshots of the group chat, copies of all communication where I'd paid for utilities, maintenance, the HOA fees, every last thread of evidence. And then I sent a short, direct email to my cousin Melissa, an attorney. Subject line, legal question. Body, what would it take to reclaim a property I purchased but mistakenly signed over to someone else? I have documentation of my payments and their statements confirming it was temporary. She replied within 20 minutes. Depends on jurisdiction, but you may have grounds to pursue a quiet title action. Can you send me all documents? I sent everything. After that, I went to take a shower, my first one in days that wasn't supervised by a nurse. The water was too hot. It stung my back. My arm ached when I tried to reach for the shampoo, but it was worth it. When I got out, I wrapped myself in a towel and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look broken. I looked ready. By evening, I had a reply from Melissa. She confirmed what I already suspected. If I could prove I paid for the property and was misled into signing the document, I had a case. A good one. That night, I pulled on jeans and a sweater, stepped into sneakers, and brushed my hair for the first time in 4 days. I applied just enough concealer to cover the bruise on my forehead. Let them think I was still recovering. Let them think I was still the quiet one. Let them think wrong. I checked my reflection once more before grabbing my purse. Then I texted Melissa. Let's file it. Some inherit power. I built mine, and now I'm enforcing it. By the next morning, the silence in the condo felt different, not just empty, strategic. I'd spent the night reviewing every document I'd scanned, filing them into neatly labeled folders, building my digital arsenal. When the sun finally slipped through the blinds and hit the floor, I already had a plan. I sat at the dining table, the one Seraphine and I had picked out from that overpriced showroom, and opened my laptop. The email subject line wrote itself. Subject: regarding the engagement. I kept the tone calm, distant, almost surgical. No dramatics, no venom, just facts, evidence, and a refusal to let them write my story without me. I attached screenshots from the group chat that excluded me. Proof I was never even considered. The mortgage statements with my name, the wire transfers, and finally, a scanned copy of the transfer agreement I had unknowingly signed. Then, one final line: I will not attend. Consider this the last time I respond without legal counsel. I hovered over send for a full minute, then clicked it. It was done. Less than an hour later, the ripple began. Seraphine's text was first. Raya, come on. Don't escalate this. We're family. I stared at the message. For a moment, I wondered if she truly believed that, or if family was just the tool she used when she needed forgiveness on demand. I didn't reply. I blocked her instead. Next came a voicemail from Verena. Her voice was syrupy, like she was laying it on thick for a church bake sale. You're being really dramatic, honey. This isn't the way to handle things. If you need to talk, we can talk. But airing grievances like this, it's not classy. Classy. As if what they'd done was a fashion faux pas I had overreacted to. I deleted the voicemail and turned off my ringer. Around noon, I was in the middle of typing up a timeline for my lawyer when I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated, then walked slowly to the door, peeking through the peephole. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Delaney. I opened the door. Hi, sweetheart, she said, holding a small container. Brought you some chicken soup. Heard you were in an accident. She smiled warmly, her silver hair perfectly curled. I stepped aside, letting her in. Thanks, I said. That's really kind of you. She walked into the kitchen like she had 100 times before, placing the container on the counter. I saw your mom the other day, she said casually, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was hosting that engagement brunch for Seraphine. Lovely event, though I was surprised you weren't there. I stiffened but nodded. Yeah, I wasn't invited. She blinked, startled. Really? That's odd. Your mom said you were traveling, that it would have been too upsetting to change the energy of the day. Too upsetting. There it was again. My emotions, always the perceived threat. I guess they didn't want to complicate things, I said flatly. She frowned. Well, that doesn't seem right, especially considering... She trailed off as if realizing she might have said too much. I smiled politely. Don't worry about it. She touched my shoulder gently. Families can be complicated, but that doesn't mean they can erase you. After she left, I sat on the couch holding the edge of the soup container and let her words sink in. They can't erase you. But they had tried, and they were still trying. By mid-afternoon, I'd compiled everything into one long email thread and sent it to Melissa, my cousin and legal advisor. She replied in 20 minutes. Raya, you have a strong case. Quiet title action is appropriate here. You'll need to prepare for discovery, but I think we can win this. I responded with 2 words. Do it. Later that evening, I drafted one more message, directed, not public. One final attempt at resolution, just in case Seraphine had even a sliver of decency left. Seraphine, I gave you the benefit of the doubt when I signed that document. I believed you when you said it was temporary. I believed you because I was raised to believe that family protects one another. But family doesn't lie. Family doesn't gaslight. Family doesn't steal and then call it love. Reverse the title transfer. Return what's mine, or I'll let the courts decide. Raya, I didn't send it with hope. I sent it as a courtesy. Her response never came, but I wasn't surprised. Silence had always been her answer when she wasn't in control of the narrative. I powered down my laptop, stood up, and stretched. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the trees, casting a golden edge across the sky. I made myself a cup of tea, walked to the window, and watched the light change. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about reclaiming the spotlight or demanding apologies. This was about the truth. They ignored my warning. Now I was done talking. The email had been sent. The legal paperwork was filed. My lawyer had confirmed receipt and told me we were officially in motion, and I felt calm, not victorious, not vengeful, just still. Until 3 days later, when a cream-colored envelope arrived taped to my front door. I found it early that morning after stepping out to grab the mail. It fluttered slightly in the breeze, the tape curling at the edges. My name was printed in bold across the front. No salutation, no warmth. Inside, a formal eviction notice, effective immediately, signed by Seraphine. The printed language was precise and cold. Unauthorized occupant, non-tenant, trespassing risk. The legal jargon felt like it belonged in a movie, but the signature at the bottom was real. Seraphine's neat cursive, just as rehearsed as her public smiles. She hadn't even knocked. I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me with a calm that bordered on eerie. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't panic. I sat down at the kitchen table, placed the letter beside my coffee, and read it again. Then I folded it in half, tucked it under my laptop, and opened a new document titled Retaliation Strategy. Later that afternoon, I started packing. It took me longer than expected with only one usable arm, but I refused to ask for help. The sling itched beneath my sweater. My ribs still ached when I twisted. But I packed anyway, because I knew Seraphine would expect me to fall apart. She expected me to beg. Instead, I folded my clothes neatly, stacked them into a single suitcase, and loaded my toiletries into a tote bag. I packed not because I believed I didn't belong there, but because I needed them to know I wasn't afraid to walk away, even from something I had built with my own hands. When I zipped up the suitcase, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Then the door opened. Seraphine didn't even knock. She walked in like she owned the place, which, on paper, for now, she did. She stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed, face carefully blank. Not smug, not cruel, just distant, like she'd made peace with hurting me as long as it kept things tidy. "Moving out?" she asked, voice light, casual. I didn't answer. I bent to zip my second bag. "You could have just let it go," she said, stepping further into the living room. "But no, you had to make this into a thing." A thing. My home, my investment, my betrayal. I turned to face her. "You lied to me? About everything," she shrugged. "You were never good at letting things roll off your back. That's always been your problem." I stared at her for a long second, then said simply, "And yours is assuming I'll never fight back." I pushed past her, suitcase in one hand, bag over my shoulder. She didn't move, didn't offer to help, didn't apologize. Verena was waiting in the hallway. She looked me over, lips tight, eyes blank. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she muttered. The phrase landed like a slap I didn't bother dodging. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her any more words. I walked past both of them, my gait uneven from the pain, but my spine straight. Each step down the hall felt like pulling roots out of the ground, slow, painful, but necessary. When I reached the elevator, I hit the button and waited in silence. No one followed. No one tried to stop me. No one cared. And that, I realized, was the most freeing part of it all. An hour later, I sat in a quiet guest room 2 miles away, at a friend's house. The walls were bare, the furniture simple, but it was safe. It was mine, for now. I didn't unpack. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the legal case file, and began organizing every receipt, document, photo, and message I had into folders. Payments, deed, family communications, eviction. I wasn't building a defense. I was building a case. The next morning, I woke to a ping on my phone, an alert from social media. Seraphine had posted a photo of the condo, a smiling selfie of her and Julian on the balcony, champagne flutes raised. Caption, "New beginnings in our beautiful home. So grateful for this next chapter." My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I didn't send it to anyone. I took a screenshot. Then I emailed it to Melissa. Subject: Exhibit A, public misrepresentation. I didn't need to respond with rage. I had paper trails. I had timestamps. I had her signature on 2 separate documents. Let the court see gratitude measured in hashtags. A few days later, I met with Melissa in person. We sat in her office, surrounded by case folders and caffeine. "You ready for this?" she asked, glancing over her notes. I nodded. She leaned forward. "We're going full court order, civil suit, public hearing. This won't stay quiet." "Good," I said. "Quiet is how they win." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. My posture didn't cave. They had thrown me out of my house. Let's see how they handle getting thrown out of theirs. The filing had gone public that morning. Melissa had called to confirm the civil suit was officially listed in the court's database, and a hearing date had been set. No more warnings, no more private emails. The truth now had a docket number. I was on my second cup of coffee in my friend Carla's kitchen when I got the notification, a message request from Julian. That alone stopped me cold. I hadn't spoken to him directly in over a year. The last real interaction was at a family barbecue where he complimented the patio furniture and avoided my eyes when Seraphine made a passive-aggressive joke about some people holding grudges too long. Now, out of the blue, a message. It wasn't long. "I didn't know they excluded you. I thought you chose not to come. That's what your mom and Seraphine told me." I read it twice before clicking reply. Not to fight, not to vent, but because his version of the truth needed updating. I typed slowly, deliberately. "That's not what happened. I wasn't invited. They hid it, repeatedly. I have proof. Group chats, payment records, title transfers. You've been lied to, just like I was used." A moment passed, then another. His reply came. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm pulling back from Seraphine. A lot doesn't feel right anymore." I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't thank him either. Instead, I said what mattered. You don't need to choose sides. Just don't let silence rewrite the truth. He left the message on read. That was enough. That evening, Melissa and I sat side by side at her office conference table, reviewing the last round of filings. The civil suit now included counts of wrongful eviction, fraud, and property misrepresentation, all backed by documents, all time-stamped, all legal. She looked up at me mid-scroll. "You know this could get ugly. I'm counting on it," I said. The following morning, Seraphine responded, not through direct contact, but on social media. A carefully crafted caption beneath a black and white photo of her, staring pensively out the window of a high-rise cafe. "Sometimes family is just the people who cheer for you, not tear you down. Learning to release toxic ties has been the most liberating part of this journey. Shash, self-love. Shash, healthy boundaries. Shash, protect your peace." Within minutes, people began commenting. "You're so strong, Seraphine. Cutting out the negativity. Yes, girl. Family drama? You don't owe anyone your energy." I didn't reply, but Melissa did. Using her firm's official account, she posted a redacted version of the court filing. No commentary, no hashtags, just a statement. "Filed and served. Full civil petition available via court record search. Defense counsel may contact our office with questions." It didn't take long before the tone of Seraphine's comments shifted. "What's this about a lawsuit? Wait, are you being sued over a house? I thought you bought that condo." I watched in real time as Seraphine's curated image began to crack. And I didn't lift a finger. But I wasn't done. That Saturday was her bridal shower, a lavish event at a rooftop venue. I didn't attend, of course. I had no interest in performing grief in front of pastel tablecloths and custom cupcakes, but my lawyer did. At exactly 2:00 p.m., Melissa's associate walked into the venue with a manila envelope and a court seal. Seraphine was mid-sentence, holding a glass of rosé, when she was approached. "Miss Seraphine Caldwell?" the woman asked. "Yes?" "You've been officially served." A quiet fell over the crowd like someone had cut the music mid-song. A few guests gasped. Someone whispered my name. Someone else muttered, "Is this a joke?" It wasn't. The envelope was handed off. Seraphine stood frozen. For once, no words, no pose, no performance, and I wasn't even there. I was at home, my temporary home, watching the sky shift colors through the window, a cup of tea in hand, and a peaceful kind of fire in my chest. That night, a new post from Seraphine popped up. Just a quote this time. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than screaming." A photo of her looking away from the camera, windswept hair, no caption. But this time the comments were less supportive. "Wait, are you suing your sister? Did you really evict her from her own house? I thought you said she ghosted the family." And then, from someone I didn't know. Funny how the toxic one is always the one with receipts. I didn't smile, not exactly, but I did feel something settle inside me. For years, they'd written the story of who I was. Now every word they tried to erase was inked in court record. They built their empire on my silence. Now it was crumbling, brick by brick. The last text I read before closing my eyes that night was from Melissa. "Tomorrow, 2:00 p.m. It will be delivered on site, just as planned." I slept surprisingly well. No dreams, no tossing, just rest. The kind I hadn't had in weeks. I woke up early, made myself toast, and sat by the window in Carla's guest room. The sky was overcast, gray and soft, like the quiet before something inevitable. I took a breath, held it, and let it go slowly. This wasn't about rage anymore. This was about completion. By noon, Melissa had confirmed that the package was on its way to the event venue. The engagement party, what was supposed to be Seraphine's crowning moment, was being held at a waterfront ballroom they'd rented for the day. I knew the place. It was all exposed beams, glass, and river views, perfect for Instagram stories and completely indifferent to the truth. Inside the package was everything I wanted them to see, and more importantly, what I wanted others to witness. A printed screenshot of Verena's infamous "grab a taxi" message, framed in matte black. An envelope containing bank records showing every cent I'd put into the condo over the last 2 years. And a single note card that read, "I decline the invitation to a place I already paid for." No dramatic paragraphs, no threats, just a statement of fact. I imagined the moment that box would be opened, the silence it would bring, the awkward shuffling of feet. I didn't need to be there to feel it. At exactly 2:06 p.m., Melissa texted me one word: delivered. I put down my phone and made tea. The following morning, news started circulating. A friend who had been invited but didn't attend forwarded me a few messages. One read, "Did you see what Raya sent? I thought she was the one who ghosted the family." Another, "Seraphine looked like she saw a ghost. Julian walked out right after they opened the box. Didn't say a word." That one made me pause. Julian walked out. No speech, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing in a room full of liars. A few days later, the final blow arrived not in a manila envelope, but with the sound of metal being drilled into brick. I sat in Carla's car across the street from the condo as 2 county clerks nailed a court order to the front of the building. Eviction notice. Sealed and signed. Seraphine stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face pale. Verena hovered behind her, trying to reason with the clerk, pleading about wedding stress and family misunderstandings. The man didn't flinch. Malcolm stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, not saying a word, not lifting a finger. He had always been a master at avoiding discomfort. Silence had always been his safe space. As the clerk stepped away from the doorway, Seraphine ripped the paper off the brick and stormed inside. I didn't need to see more. I told Carla we could leave. That evening, Melissa called me from the courthouse. She was smiling. I could hear it in her voice. "It's done," she said. "Full ownership returned to you. The judge added a public note about the wrongful eviction and acknowledged the documents you provided. In his words, it never should have happened." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat still, letting the moment pass through me like wind. Melissa added, I'll send the signed decision via email, but you're cleared to return anytime you want. Thank you, I said. She paused. You want to grab dinner tonight? Maybe later, I replied. I think I need a little space first. 3 days later, I unlocked the front door of my condo with a new key. The lock had been changed by order of the court. The space smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish, probably from the cleaners Melissa hired, but it felt sterile, empty in the most honest way. I stepped inside and stood there for a long moment. No pictures on the walls, no family photos, no decor choices I didn't agree to, just walls, light, and silence. I placed my bag on the kitchen counter and turned on the kettle. I didn't plan a toast. I didn't throw a welcome back party for myself. I just made tea, opened the windows, and sat quietly with a notepad. Not to make another list. Not this time. I wrote a single sentence. Some people inherit power. Others build it. The ones who build it know how to keep it. Later that night, I sat on the balcony alone. The city lights flickered across the skyline. From where I sat, I could see the space where Seraphine once posed for her photos, her filtered version of our life. It was quiet now, and it was mine. I didn't take everything back. I just took back what should have never been stolen. That sentence stayed with me for days. I didn't take everything back. I just took back what should have never been stolen. It became a quiet mantra I repeated while doing dishes, folding laundry, or walking past my own reflection in the hallway mirror. There was no euphoria, no dramatic swell of closure, just a return to stillness. The condo no longer echoed with other people's choices. It was mine again. But it didn't feel like it used to. Not quite. There were shadows in the corners, echoes of every "you're overreacting" and "we didn't think you'd want to be involved." Those words had a way of staining the walls, lingering in door frames, hiding behind light switches. So I started small. I boxed up the photos first. The ones in silver frames, on the mantel, in the hallway. Family portraits with tight smiles and forced poses. Ones where I was standing off to the side, always a little farther from the center. I didn't throw them away. I wasn't interested in erasing history. I just didn't want to live inside a museum curated by people who pretended I didn't matter. I cleared the closets next, shelves lined with Seraphine's temporary boxes, Verena's cookware she'd conveniently forgotten to take with her, old Christmas decor labeled with masking tape that read, Raya's spare space. I donated most of it. The rest I packed in plain cardboard and left outside the storage unit with a note. Unclaimed property, 14 days. The bedroom was the hardest. I left it for last. The duvet had been a joint pick between me and Seraphine during the brief window when we were pretending to play house. The lamp was a gift from Verena, wrapped in a note that said, "For your first real home, don't mess it up." I replaced both. I opened the windows. I bought fresh eucalyptus for the bathroom and finally threw away the shower curtain with the rust stain she always said added character. And when I stood in the middle of that space, bare feet on hardwood floors, sun pouring in from the west-facing balcony, I whispered, I don't want to erase them. I just don't want to live among their shadows. That weekend, I heard from an old coworker that Julian had moved out of the apartment he once shared with Seraphine. He'd gone quiet on social media. She'd deleted all their engagement photos. Verena, I learned through Carla, had moved in with her sister in Oregon. Just until things calmed down, she reportedly said. I imagined her sitting at someone else's kitchen table, spooning sugar into coffee and retelling the story in her version, where I was still difficult, where she was blindsided. But I didn't feel triumph. Not really. I felt relief. I was mid-morning into reorganizing my bookshelves when I received a letter. Actual paper. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Harold. My grandfather. The envelope was thin. One sheet, folded once. Raya, it began. Some people mistake silence for weakness, but I always knew. Your silence was thinking, planning, surviving. I'm sorry I didn't speak up more. I saw things. You know I did. And I should have said more. But age makes you tired, and family politics makes you quieter than you want to be. But I want you to know. I saw you. I always did. I sat down with the letter on my lap, holding it with both hands like it might tear if I breathed too hard. It was the first time I'd cried in months. Not the gasping, messy kind, just a quiet stream that fell steadily as I read his words again. I saw you. Validation didn't change the past, but sometimes it stitches together the present just enough so it stops unraveling. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease to rent out the guest bedroom. A grad student in her late 20s moved in, someone respectful who kept to herself and paid on time. We shared kitchen space and made small talk about tea brands. It worked. I also started volunteering at the neighborhood legal aid center once a week. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure no one else signed something they didn't understand. No one else got told, "You're lucky to even be here." Because housing isn't just walls and windows, it's dignity. I helped a single mom fight a sudden rent hike. I worked with a young couple to understand lease terms in English instead of legal jargon. I even drafted a resource pamphlet on quiet title actions, anonymously, of course. Every step, every little effort helped me take back not just space, but voice. Last Sunday, I walked past a cafe I hadn't visited in a long time. It was where Seraphine used to host her PR brunches, women in branding meetings that were less about mentorship and more about curated photos and networking over overpriced eggs. I stepped inside, ordered a black coffee, no cream, no sugar, just clean and bitter. No one recognized me. And for the first time, I didn't mind. I wasn't invisible anymore. I just chose peace over proving myself. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just walks out and doesn't come back. Sometimes the loudest victories are won in silence, not with shouting matches or dramatic confrontations, but with steady steps, quiet strength, and undeniable truth. Raya didn't set out for revenge. She sought clarity, dignity, and peace in a world that constantly tried to shrink her. What about you? Have you ever been made to feel invisible by the very people who should have stood by you? Share your story in the comments. We read every one. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one.